Okay, we're going to try this again. This is a first. So I'm Andrea Flack-Wetherald. This is Lunch and Breathe. It's a weekly installment that I do on LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live. And it's sort of a play on the idea of a lunch and learn, where instead I invite you to take a mindful moment to think critically about a new topic each week, to hopefully just help you get the week started off right. Normally we do this on Mondays at noon, but this week it's on a Wednesday because my husband and I were celebrating our 10-year wedding anniversary and we were away. So thank you to those of you who are joining. I see a couple of you joining on Facebook, and hopefully there will be some followers on LinkedIn as well. It's often hard for me to tell since I do a double broadcast. I just have faith that you're there and that you're listening because you reach out to me later and tell me that it's meaningful. So, okay, the topic this week is the illusion of evidence. And that's sort of maybe like the catchiest sounding title that I've had yet. It made me feel like I was creating an NPR podcast or something. I feel like there's a lot to be said about this topic of evidence. So what I wanted to start you off with is some background on why I picked this topic. So I was on a call with one of my coaching clients. She is in a time of transition, and she and I are working together on figuring out what her true purpose is, so that she knows how to move forward and how to start taking courageous action towards that goal. So she and I were having a conversation about, in our sessions together, she'd kind of narrowed down, maybe it'll be this thing, I'll start my own business, or maybe it will be that I finally, confront my boss, or maybe this person gets fired and then it feels great to just stay where I am. One of those two things. And the more we talked, the more it was like both of those outcomes didn't feel like the right thing for her. And so we ended up talking about how just because those are the only two choices that she sees right now, it does not mean that those are the only two outcomes, like that those are the only two choices for real. And I shared with her this story. I don't know if any of you guys ever watched the show Numbers. Maybe just let me know in the comments if you watched that show. I think it's on Netflix still. I don't remember. I feel like this show was popular when I was in high school. So it's an oldie but a goodie in my opinion. But they were explaining why it's not necessarily the most effective way to find the culprit by doing like a visual lineup. And so, they explained that if you show somebody like a group of 10 people and you're like, which of these guys did it or whatever, they will instinctually feel like it definitely was one of those 10 instead of thinking, maybe it wasn't. And so the example that he gave, Charlie is this brother that's super like a child prodigy, basically. And he writes the numbers 1 through 10 down on a piece of paper, and he looks up at his brother, whose name I can't remember right now. And he says, I'm thinking of a number. Guess which number it is. And, the brother's like, 6, no, 7, no, 3, no, 4, no, 1, no. And so he guesses all the numbers. And he's like, well, I don't understand. It's not any of the numbers that you wrote down. He said, right, I didn't say it was 1 through 10. He said the number I was thinking of was 23. So he never told him it has to be one of these numbers that you see in front of you. But the fact that they were presented in front of him caused him to assume I have to pick 1 through 10. Sometimes the answer is 23. So I was talking with my client about that very thing, and about how in life, what we tend to do is see what's laid out in front of us and then assume it has to be one of these things. These are the choices. This is the hand I was dealt, this is what it's got to be, one of these things. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes that's not the answer. And sometimes patience and creativity and problem solving will help you come to a brand new conclusion. So in order to kind of get more into this and hopefully make this feel more actionable and like a very helpful moment to breathe and think critically about what's happening in your life, let's talk about what evidence feels like. What does it feel like when you're looking around and you feel like you can prove to someone, this is what the situation is. This is what it's going to be like for me. So, I'll give you an example. Before the pandemic, if you can recall a time when we all went to our offices and consultants like me would come in person, if you remember what events were, back in those days, I would get on site and people would be itching to prove to me who the bad guy was. They'd be itching to just prove to me that they were right so-and-so was the problem. Do you want to see the emails? Do you want to see the text messages? Look at this thing that they, were circulating around the office, and they want to prove to me. They feel like they've collected this evidence, and it feels so validating, to win somebody over onto your side and, to have had the most detailed statistics and whatever, evidence to point to prove that you're right. So this is a good starting point, because this takes us to what we think evidence is. We treat evidence like what it is proof. That evidence is proof, and it feels, reassuring, and it feels validating, and it feels definitive. That's how we treat evidence. But that's not really what evidence is. So I think maybe there would be a temptation to hear what I'm saying and be like, okay, it feels a little bit unsettling to say, that I wasn't really victimized by my coworkers. Or are you trying to tell me that, my story isn't real or something like that? And absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm not saying that you don't have hurtful things you can point to. I certainly am not denying anyone their story. But let's take a closer look at what that evidence is, because one thing that I share quite often with my clients is that we find what we look for. So let's use another example. I was talking with a woman who had come to a retreat that I offered like a year and a half ago down in Black Mountain, North Carolina. I love it there. I get there as often as I can. And I was leading a retreat, and we were talking about professional trauma. So these are the experiences where maybe your brain doesn't receive what's happening to you as trauma right away. It's easy to understand assault or a car accident or some type of near-death experience as traumatic. Our brain instantly understands that this was a traumatic thing that has happened. But when you are showing up at an office day in and day out, and it is just eroding your emotional reserve, and you are losing yourself day in and day out, little by little, there's just this erosion of personality, and who you really are starts slipping away. And in place of who you really are come all these limiting beliefs about your worthiness, about what you're capable of, about what's possible for you. And this woman had been in a situation like that, and I know what that feels like. I have personal experience of what it's like to be in a professional situation like that, where you feel like you're trapped. In this woman's case, she finally was no longer in that situation anymore, and time has erased my memory of whether she voluntarily left or was fired. I don't remember anymore. I've been in both situations. But she now was in a situation where it had been a long time, and she wasn't able to find the next right thing. And so she started telling me, it is going to be so hard for me to find a job that's the right fit for me. It's impossible to find this line of work, this very specialized line of work, given these circumstances. And one time she sent me, I think it was on LinkedIn, it might've been an email though. She sent me a screenshot of a chart she had found that says, there was this study that was like, that's findings had said, it's easier for someone with a criminal record to get hired than someone that has longer than a 2-year gap of employment or something like this. And I think my response was, don't listen to this. Just ignore this. The statistics have nothing to do with you, first of all. But second of all, of course she would find that evidence. Of course she would find that evidence, because she's finding what she's looking for. And that's what I shared with her. You find what you're looking for. And so she found this chart, from this scholarly article about, employment and HR and things like this, that's saying, basically you're doomed. Basically you're trapped, right? And it feels like this inescapable thing. Here's this, empirically reviewed, evidently, scholarly articles saying that it will be difficult for me to get hired doing what I want to be doing or doing anything at this point. So it just feels like the floor drops out from underneath her, and it feels hopeless. And it's like, well, now what am I going to do? Well, now what? Because now it feels hopeless. So this is the whole thing with evidence. It feels definitive. It feels like I knew it. It gives you that sense of validation, like, oh, my suspicions were true. This is the reason why evidence is so tricky, because you will find what you're looking for. Now, if you're hearing me say this and you're like, well, hold on, because sometimes evidence is really helpful. Sometimes evidence leads us to an understanding that we need to have. Sometimes evidence is proof of something, like they say, well, sometimes evidence, we see the smoke and then we know that there's fire. So what about that, And I understand that loud and clear. So let's talk about what evidence is. We've decided that it's not proof. It's not the definitive end all be all, end of investigation needed. We're done now. We have evidence. That's not what it is. So what is it? Evidence is a paper lantern on the path of discovery. Now, before you freak out and you're like, ugh, what an irritating sentence for someone to say. That's so, cliche sounding or whatever. Before you have that reaction, I want you to really think about what that means. So if you are on the path of discovery, if the goal is learning, then evidence is pointing you towards the next step, pointing you towards the next discovery. It's just helping you ask better questions. So this is what I want your key takeaway today to be, that if you don't want for evidence to be proving you into a corner and then you're trapped, like what good is that? You're gonna keep waking up every day, Do you want to be miserable or not? Do you want to be stuck or not? Do you want to be isolated or not? So if the answer is no, I don't want to be isolated forever. No, I don't want to be stuck. I don't want to feel trapped in a situation that's not working for me. Then you need to figure out how to stop treating the evidence that you're seeing around you. Like it's just how it's going to work. You've been focusing on, I'm trapped. You've been focusing on, this sucks. You've been focusing on, of course this happened because I should have gotten out when I had the chance, or I should have gotten a different degree, or I should have whatever. And I, so often when I'm working with people, I just hear them shaming themselves around and around and around for decisions that they've made in the past. And, you can't change the past. And so now people have this story like, well, I made my bed. Now I got to lay in it. What I want to tell you is that if you don't want that to be true, if you don't want the story to be that you've peaked, then you haven't. If you don't want the story to be that you're stuck in this situation, then you're not, okay? So we need to find evidence that will help you believe that, right? And so this is the first step in that process, is to just treat evidence differently. So what I want you to start doing is, instead of looking for evidence to prove something, instead of looking for evidence and treating it like proof, use evidence as a way to ask better questions. So I think a perfect example of this are the early astronomers. And so I'll be honest that I love astronomy. My daughter and I, back when places were a thing, used to hang out at the Science Center quite a lot and go to Skywatch. And we've been in the planetarium I don't know how many times. We live in Pittsburgh in a neighborhood not far away from where there's this observatory that's just beautiful. And so we were quite fascinated by the stars in my family. But I'll be honest that I'm not an expert in this. So I was doing a little Googling to kind of fact check myself, and I realized, wow, there's a lot here. I'm going to have to, in time, I guess, iron this out more if it's helpful. But big picture, the earliest astronomers were in a world where they believed the Earth is flat. So there's only so much discovering you can do, or you'll just fall right off the face of the planet, right? Like, don't go too far in your boat or you'll fall off the edge of the Earth. How scary. How scary. And so, in time though, Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo and different people were just observing. They were observing, and they weren't observing to find proof that the Earth is flat or find proof that it's not. They weren't necessarily looking for proof. They were looking with curiosity. And in time, they got these inklings like, well, wait a minute. Kepler was the one that was, I believe, now I'm scared, I believe, was the one that was positing that there could be elliptical orbits. And in time, that started making him and others wonder, like, what about, he was not the first person, I did learn that today, to wonder if maybe the Earth is not the center. Maybe the sun is the center, not the Earth. And of course, these were like terrifying concepts back then, and we don't need to get all down into that. What I want you to start thinking about is that they used evidence to start asking better questions. Like, well, what if, the Earth is not the center? It wasn't like in one moment they were able to prove everything. We are still discovering space. There's this journey, this commitment to discovery, this commitment to curiosity, And then the pieces of evidence that they find are like one more piece of the puzzle, and what they're doing is asking better questions. So let's land the plane and apply this to your life. Okay. So if we're using these same skills that the early astronomers did, it was like fear and doubt, perhaps, that originally got people asking these questions like, is the earth flat? Like, that would be horrifying to just like fall off the edge of the earth. Like, is that the way it works, or is it possible that it's different? So fear and doubt can be a powerful impetus. In improv, we say follow the fear, because sometimes that feeling of fear is calling your attention to something really worthwhile. And so if you're afraid that you're trapped, if you're afraid that it can't get better in your marriage or in your relationship with your kids or your relationship with your boss or whatever it is, you're feeling isolated and stuck and trapped, and your fear is like, maybe this is all there is. Pay attention to that fear. You don't need to hide from it. Please don't drink it away. Please don't numb down those feelings. Use that as the impetus to do some more exploring. So if we're using the kind of early astronomers as an example, what I think is cool is that going from am I capable? Let's do that. So if we're using evidence like proof, then you're trying to answer the question, am I capable? Is it possible for me to be more vulnerable so that I don't feel alone all the time? Is it possible for me to get paid to do what I love? Is it possible for me not to be stuck in this job that I hate? When you're using evidence to find proof of something, you're going to prove to yourself one way or the other. That's the question that you're asking. And the trouble with that is that on one day you can have a good day and prove to yourself that, great, there is hope. But then on a bad day, you're proving to yourself that there's not. So proof is a tricky thing because it's a day by day basis, right? But if you're using evidence as a little glimmer of hope on a bigger scale, like a bigger path, a commitment to discovery, commitment to curiosity, then you're asking better questions. So am I capable becomes, why was it hard before? What is it that makes me struggle? And then you start doing really important work of exploring like, I wonder why things are like this with my boss or with my spouse. I wonder what is it that makes me choose certain things or behave a certain way. And when you start getting clues into your own behavior, into your own patterns, your own, what limiting belief am I holding on to that is making me stay at this job? Is it that I'm convinced it's not possible because of the pandemic or because of something else? Why do I believe that? Is it because I'm in an echo chamber of negativity? When you start asking better questions, the path starts illuminating. One discovery leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. And before you know it, you have a much broader understanding of what's possible and a much more hopeful future. Okay. So that's the deal. That's the illusion of evidence, is that it's proof. And then we prove ourselves into a corner. And it doesn't feel good. It does not feel good, and it's not how it has to be. So I really encourage you, if you are noticing about yourself that you tend to use evidence of, failed relationships in the past, or the fact that you didn't perform well at a couple of job interviews or didn't get a callback, or whatever it is, you are using that as evidence to say, this proves it, I'm stuck. Better to just stay here. I really encourage you to stop using evidence like proof and start using it like clues, and use it to be kind of the impetus to ask better questions, because that is where some really critical freedom is waiting for you. Some really critical discoveries are waiting for you. So I hope that this is encouraging. I'm going to sign off for now, but I do just want to remind you that if you are on this journey of trying to figure out what could be next for me, whatever is next, I call that a win, WIN, whatever is next. And you would like some help unpacking and figuring out what that could be like, I would really love to hear from you. And I do have a free workbook designed to help you investigate that independently, using these tools that I've been teaching my clients about ikigai and mindful improv, a very specific process for figuring out what those limiting beliefs are and dealing with them. So if that sounds helpful, just either comment or message me. A lot of people choose to just message me, and that's fine. I'm back home from North Carolina and West Virginia now, and so I'll be a lot more responsive on LinkedIn Messenger. Thank you to those of you who were patient while I was gone. So message me if you'd like that workbook. Message me if you would like some help in figuring out what's next for you and getting unstuck. It's my heart's work to help people use forgiveness to heal their way to their goals. I really love that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on Monday for our next installment of Lunch and Breathe. Thank you guys.